in
Ready.
3, 2, 1.
Hello and good morning, everyone. Welcome to another edition of Drone Deploy's webinars focused on using drones for good. Today, we've got a very exciting session for you. I'm super stoked to be able to talk to you about archaeology and cultural heritage, leveraging drones and other site scanning technologies. We've got a few exciting groups who we've been working with, who will be sharing their experience today, and hopefully you'll enjoy it. We'll have time to go through a couple of different presentations, and then at the end, have a few moments for Q&A. Really quickly, just so y'all know, there we go. Today we'll be talking with Misiones Coloniales, who are mapping heritage sites across Chihuahua in Mexico, as well as some representatives who have been working at the University of Pennsylvania on archaeological sites in southern Iraq. A few introductions. My name's Gunther. I am the Director of Product Design and User Experience at DRONEDEPLOY. Been in the company for a few years, and I'm very excited to be able to work directly with a lot of our partners who are using our tools to do exciting things around the world, and for very good reasons, right? We'll be joined today by a couple of different groups. First of all, I'd like to introduce Carla Muñoz Alcocer, who is the founder and director of Misiones Coloniales. Just a few brief words about each of these folks as we move along. Carla has a PhD in conservation and restoration of cultural heritage from the Universidad Politécnica in Valencia. And I do believe actually you're about to head off to do some finalization of that today, right? So once we're done with this webinar here, I think you're jumping right on the plane and heading out for that ceremony. So congratulations, that's awesome. She's been working on this project for quite some time. Was a founder and director of Misiones Coloniales. In 2011, she established the first laboratory focused on science conservation research of cultural heritage in northern Mexico. She has spent over 7 years at the Smithsonian Institution as a conservator and director of the project Imaginería de las Californias, which studied the Spanish colonial polychrome sculpture in the southwest of the US and northern Mexico. And currently she's working as a professor at Tecnológico de Monterrey Campus, Chihuahua. So thank you very much for joining us. In addition, we have her colleague, Rey Fernando Montes Treviso, and he is an architect specializing in sustainable regional agriculture. He is certified in cultural heritage management and conservation of earth and architecture, and holds a master's degree in cultural heritage and tourism. Currently, he is pursuing a master's degree in archaeology and urbanism with the theme of the iconography of the Metropolitan Cathedral of the city of Chihuahua. Additionally, he's a visiting professor at the Tecnológico de Monterrey in the Architecture and Biotechnology School for topics of earth and architecture and biodeterioration in cultural heritage. This is all a lot of cool stuff you guys are up to. He has worked in Misiones Coloniales de Chihuahua since 2008, where he has coordinated and managed restoration projects in 28 historic temples cataloged as historical monuments of federal property, and that were built between the the 17th and 19th century in Chihuahua. So thank you guys both very much for joining us. In addition, coming from another angle, we have our friend Reed Goodman, who will be is a PhD student in archaeology at the University of Pennsylvania. His research investigates the environmental context of some of the world's earliest cities in southern Iraq through remote sensing and geoarchaeology, with support from the Penn Museum, the National Science Foundation, and the Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution. Reed has used drones to explore Mesopotamian sites since 2015. When he mapped the Bronze Age city of Tel Zergal, some of these names I might not quite get right, but I think that's close, in Iraq's Governorate. He is currently working with Dr. Paul Zimmerman and Brad Hafford, both of the Penn Museum, to leverage UAV technology at the sites of Tel Al-Hiba and Tel Mokarar, ancient Lagash, and Ur. Ur is one that I think people have heard of, utilizing DRONEDEPLOY to document and model features at varying scales from entire neighborhoods and districts to individual structures. We've got a lot of smart and accomplished folks with us here today. Very excited to have you join us. And with that, let's first take a slight detour, and I can explain a little bit about DRONEDEPLOY and who we are and what we're doing. Right, DRONEDEPLOY, for those out there in the audience who might not have heard of us, is a software technology company we're the leading provider of drone data solutions for industry's top innovators, people working across the board in agriculture, construction, and other areas like that. As you can see from this map here, our tools have mapped over 200 million acres across the planet. We've actually been able to operate on almost every continent except maybe Antarctica, but who knows, maybe that'll happen someday. More than 2 million flights, working with almost 100 nonprofits, universities, and across over 200 countries. In addition, of course, to doing drone mapping, we're also looking at the tools of how we can do what we call reality capture and overall site understanding. And we'll see some examples of how we're not, people are leveraging tools that aren't just from the air, right, but also on the ground and inside, as in some of the examples we see today. A lot of this stuff is being worked on. We have a social impact group. I will pass it over to our social impact manager, Rebecca, who will tell you a little bit about the .org organization here at DRONEDEPLOY.
Thanks so much, Gunther. Oh, okay, here we go. Voices in business. Really, really excited for this webinar. We're aiming with these webinars to really share some of the amazing ways that drones can be used. And some of those might not be how you'd expect or what you've seen before. And I think all of us in this industry are just opening our eyes to the many different capabilities that this technology can bring. And so that's what we're working to do with DRONEDEPLOY.org. We want to make sure that this new technology is utilized by the organizations who need it most and who can help us deliver a more sustainable and just world. So we work with nonprofits, crisis response organizations, and universities, and provide discounted licensing to them to complete their missions and do their work. And excitingly, we've flown over 10,000 flights with those partner organizations to date, and much more to come. So this is a program that you can all apply to, pretty obvious from that website as our link. So go there, check out some of the really amazing stories of our partners, and feel free to get involved.
Right on. Thank you, Rebecca. Yeah, it's very exciting to have you here and working on these programs, and we've been expanding considerably over recent years, and the work you see here is evidence of that. So, all right. Next, let's continue. So here we go. Why use drones for archaeology and something? Well, you'll hear a lot more about that from our guest speakers here, but obviously some of the things that really can be used, these technologies can be applied to, as you can see on this list here. There's just all sorts of things that could be done, right? Surveying of locations, discovering, and documenting new discoveries, planning, as you're going through the projects, right? Assessing damage and that sort of thing, as well as, of course, just directly within the creating digital reconstructions and for active research, and then of course also just monitoring and tracking looting and other sorts of things that might be taking place on these various sites. So we're maybe hearing a little bit about that as we go along, but obviously our team here are the experts in this, and they will be able to share more of that as we dig into it. So without further ado, then let's start with that. I'd like to take the moment to pass this over back to our friends at Misiones Coloniales. And if you guys were ready, take it away and tell us what you got.
Okay. Thank you, Gunnar. Thank you, Rebecca, for letting us to give show what we do, and of course to make all people to visit Chihuahua in this moment, to transport themselves to Chihuahua, and thank you very much for letting us that. Thank you. Next, please go there. Okay, we are a non-profit that was established in 2000 by business community, businessmen and women committed on the conservation of this architecture, mainly Spanish colonial missions, but also from other foundings institutions like haciendas and royal mines that you will see in in the next slides. We are committed to preserve these structures for the community so they can have a development, economic development, and of course their own social development. Yes, got it. Okay, so this is the complete state of Chihuahua. If we are the largest state in Mexico, so if we take all these states and put it inside of Spain, it will be the 50% of Peninsula Iberica and 80% of Italy. So you can imagine the large extension of territory that we're working on. And so it's the most state in Mexico with the most large Spanish colonial missions. Of course, there is a lot of different kind of settlements. As you can see, Jesuit Spanish colonial, 114 missions, Franciscans who were established in the fields, 38 royal mines, haciendas, presidios, who were military settlements, and diocesan church, other religions that we also considered with historical elements, and others that are in studying. So this is we have a 285 communities which this cultural heritage that we are working on with them to preserve their own heritage. Next, please. So this is the panorama general from how we work. This is our team. So imagine for that extension of state, this is the team that is working on, and we have a lot of volunteers, students from different universities in Chihuahua who work with us to do all this the documentation that you will see, but also from other levels. So as you can see, we are in the middle, since we are a non-profit, that we preserve the project can continue over the time from politicals or church periods of times. And what we want is to have this increase of cultural awareness in the communities, how they can learn to preserve their own heritage, and how to promote it for cultural tourism. And of course, with restoration, we provide work, temporary work, but also temporary work. Next, please. So as you can see, this project that we are working and Fernando was leading, we started with 17 different cultural heritage sites. There are two. We have two in Chihuahua. They are from UNESCO World Cultural Heritage. One is Paquimé, which is a pre-Hispanic site, and Valle de Allende, which is the site of the El Camino Real de Tierra Adentro, who connected Mexico City with New Mexico. So these two sites were also documented as two Mexican historical sites as large cities. One archaeological Paquimé, 14 missions, Spanish colonial missions, Franciscans, and Jesuits. Yes, you can go so they can see all one of the. And also with these 14 sites, in total there were 17, and also from the 20th century. So we don't focus not only on these historicals, but also from the 20th century historical sites. Fernando will speak to you more about the technique, because he's the one who has been taking care. So if you can go further, you're welcome.
The next slide, please. And I want to share the technical features that we use to create 3D cultural heritage models In this video, you can play, please. You can see some of the models that we have in some churches. We have a very detailed ornamentation. In the case of San Jerónimo and Cathedral, we have to make some flights at low height precisely to capture the detail and ornamentation. Following photogrammetry techniques applied to the cultural heritage, we have understood that buildings with tall vertical facades, it is necessary to carry out several flights at different weights to obtain the best results. We know that by combining other techniques, we could improve some results. At the sides of the video, you can scan all the models that we share in SketchUp, and you can scan with your phone and see all the models. Based on the experience we gained documenting these sites in the last 9 months, taking the sample of the cathedral, the first flight of the drone was done autonomously, and we sat 60 meters high. To the fact that the towers of the church are 42 meters high. We enabled to advance options of DRONEDEPLOY and use 80% overlap of the image by enable the 3D perimeter and the 3D cross-hat options to obtain a general model without so much detail. Then we went down the drone to 45 meters, and we made a circular flight around the perimeter of the building with the camera at 60 degrees. We went down 30 meters more and got a little closer to build to make another circular flight, the camera at 60 degrees. For the towers and the dome, we made circular flights the different weights and distance from the object in order to capture as much detail as possible and avoid the lost information due to the distance. For the last part of the facades, we made sweeps or horizontal flights at the camera almost horizontally, 108 degrees. It tried not to show the sky in the sweep, and another one at the same height, but the camera at 60 degrees. And the most ornament part of the facades, we made small trajectories in half cycles and sweep with the horizontal camera and then tilted to the 60 degrees. It was necessary to go down to the height of 3 meters and go up of the drone by sections to obtain this resolution. You can see this technique it's a lot of work of this model. In total, for the model of the cathedral, we were able to join 903 photographs. Of the 1173, we have to take some shots because the software didn't recognize time. The shots we have to divide in 2 days with similar light conditions from the 7 a.m. to 7:30 a.m. to avoid the hard shadows and the ornamentation of the facade and the shadows of the building of the sites. The next slides, please.
This is cool.
Thank you.
Oh, hold on. There we go. There we go.
This is our workflow before and after. Until the last year, in order to carry out the survey on site, it was necessary to move 3 to 5 people to the property, cover the travel expenses, food, lodging, gas. During the days, we were on sites regularly 3 to 5 days. It was necessary, one architect, Carla or me, with experience doing surveys, tools, tape measures, camera, staff, many previous sketches before and during the stays, mainly details and thousands of photographs We carry out 3 surveys, one architectural or geometric measures, another photographic details and pathologies, and another topographical levels, basically. The 70 sites documented during this project were done by 1 or 2 people in more or less 4 hours using only the drone. The Cathedral of Chihuahua and Paquimé occupied 2 days, most because of light conditions. The office, the work office is where we notice the biggest difference before the time to download the information, process it, and transfer it. Plans took up to 12 weeks, depending of the complexity and ornamentation of the buildings. This to the fact that each image was analyzed by one, and the sketches and details were redrawn manually in AutoCAD. And we ended with a 2-dimensional plans with a acceptable quality. Today, although it's necessary to use more programs such as DRONEDEPLOY, Breakup, and Revit to process the information, and we have results in a couple of weeks. Not only plans of the current state of the building, but also it's possible to have 3D model that allows to read the building more reliably and precisely. We can also simultaneously 500 or more images from any external view, something that was impossible to visualize in plans. With this way of working, it's easier to prove the building in more global way and put emphasis on the most urgent issues. It also us to see deterioration and detail something that regularly happen to us is with our records before. It's always looked photos, and now we have the information that we need depending of the precision that we seek. Up the 100% of the exterior of the building. Next slide, please. Finally, I want to share with you the museum exhibit at Casa Chihuahua Cultural Heritage Center the last June 15. We use a SketchUp platform to be able to project 3D models or virtual models in augmented reality. And we're also able to share through virtual reality 360-degree tours of the interior of the building through cardboard glasses, and as well ortho image impressions and axonometric perspective of each building. This is a little video of this event, and it's all. I want to thank you to Gunther or Rebecca for giving us the opportunity to share this work and what we're doing to benefit the cultural heritage in our state. Thank you.
Yes, I would like to finish saying that this next slide, if you want, we want to thank you, because this is really, as you can see, our work is getting in fewer time with less and more in details. So also these models will help to professors to provide information to take it to the classroom for rural communities, and also it will help to increase cultural tourism in Chihuahua, which is not as they recognized by ICIS cultural, because it has been very natural and tourism aventura. But now with this, we can provide and invite more people to come to Chihuahua and to learn and visit these cultural sites. So thank you so much for the opportunity to bring Chihuahua to all your audience.
Oh, no, thanks back to you guys for doing all this work, and making this available to everybody. It sounds cool. It's like across the board, right? Local communities have impact from this. right? Researchers, as well as, like you just said, trying to draw people into Chihuahua as tourists. And so you got it all now, right? Adventure, excitement in the outdoors, as well as all this cool cultural heritage stuff too.
Exactly.
One thing that I'm struck by in looking at a lot of this is how incredibly detailed you guys are able to get, like intimately with these different buildings. The level of detail on the facade is amazing, but also just like being able to be on the exteriors as well as like what you were doing on the interiors. And so this is a very forward-looking way you guys are doing this. Lots of cool technologies being integrated to give a really great digital twin, as it were, an experience for people. So thank you guys so much for presenting that.
Thank you.
I think we will have a few, there's a few questions that popped up in the chat, but for all of you out in the audience, if we can just hold off on those and we'll try to get back to them at the end and as we move forward to the rest of the program. So next, let's pass it over to Reed to talk about the work he's been doing.
Hey, I just want to thank you, Carla, Fernando, wonderful presentation, and Rebecca and Gunther for giving us this opportunity. So Paul Zimmerman, unfortunately, can't join us today. He is leading a survey project right now in Saudi Arabia, actually. So I'll be sort of covering this for the both of us. And we'd like to talk to you about using drones to document and analyze ancient cities in southern Iraq, and particularly the sites of Lagash and Or. Click, please. Okay, so where are we in space? The geographical boundaries of ancient Mesopotamia were quite broad. So in addition to Iraq, we have parts of Kurdistan, Iran, Turkey, and Syria. Where we're working is in Dekar government. So where you see those two stars down there in the south of Iraq, those two sites of Lagash and Or, the very, very southern reaches where the ancient shoreline of the Persian Gulf may have been. That's part of the research question. Okay, next slide, please. All right, so the Penn Museum got the permit to work at Lagash, a site that's been worked at before, around 2018, and soon after that, click please, the Penn Museum also got a permit to work at the archaeological site of Or. These two ancient cities are located relatively close to each other. If you could click again, please. And you can see in the top left corner of this slide here, they were part of this ancient city-state, or a part of a series of ancient city-states during Mesopotamia's early dynastic period, from about 2900 to 2350 BCE. And if you could click one more time, while Lagash and Or were part of different city-states, again, they did sit on or close to this purported ancient shoreline, two very different types of sites, both in terms of their local histories and the more general topography. And we will discuss that going forward. Next slide, please. All right, so the Penn Museum's sort of mission in both of these circumstances is to document, to analyze, to educate, and ultimately to preserve. You know, Iraq remains a very difficult place to access, and access is never guaranteed. At the same time, climate change and looting are wreaking havoc on sites, particularly in southern Iraq. So while we have the opportunity and the technology, it's really important that teams do this, and we are by far not the only team. There are a lot of people that are working both in northern and southern Iraq that are using drones and that are doing really, really great work. But of course, one of the most important parts of this is that drone imaging in particular is not destructive. And so if we get really great data and we don't have to sort of destroy anything for the next generation, fantastic on all fronts. Next slide, please. So just a brief history of sort of aerial imaging from above, because that's really, you know, how we initially got interested in this technology. So really early on, during the early 20th century, biplanes were sort of redirected from various military missions to take opportunistic photographs of sites, especially northern Mesopotamia, where sites are quite vertically, they're very tall, they cast shadows, they image very nicely. In the south, it's a bit trickier, you know, and that sort of plane technology went for a really long time, 50s and 60s, new data were coming out in that fashion. And then the Ba'athist regime came into power. And since then, it's been really difficult sort of getting access to high resolution, low altitude imagery. So archaeologists have sort of tried to get around that by using things like kites, satellite imagery, especially the high resolution satellite imagery, but the drones started to really make a great impact. Next slide, please. So there are tons of challenges. And first and foremost, it's just getting a drone into Iraq. That is always difficult. There are legitimate security concerns, have been, and there probably will continue to be. But when we can get them in there, and we're operating safely and in full coordination with Iraq's government, there are still some sort of basic operating problems that we definitely face. So the big ones are weather related everywhere in Iraq. And then the other big one is data processing. Because it is difficult to get to Iraq, it's very expensive. We have a limited team. The ability to not only capture data, but then in real time verify that that data is good, and also to get pointers or instruction on what we have to do differently is sort of, you couldn't buy it. So that's where DRONEDEPLOY has come in time and time again to sort of save us, to help us. We'll talk about that in a little bit more detail later on. But working in these sort of difficult locations, not having the bandwidth to process data ourselves, it's been really wonderful to have a sort of out-of-the-box solution like DRONEDEPLOY. Next slide, please. Okay, so the first site that I'd like to introduce you to is Lagash. The modern name is Tel Al-Hila. Lagash is an enormous site. People say it's between 400 or 500 hectares. It's somewhere in that range. It's not just this one large tell that you see here on the bottom. There are a series of smaller sites off to the sides. You can see in that middle image. And so Paul in particular was implementing this sort of full out walking and drone survey. And as you can see, in an area like this, that is this flat, elevation is everything. Subtle changes in elevation provide really meaningful information to us. And so we needed a way to get at that and in a timely and in a cost-effective manner. Next slide, please. And here's Or is a very different site. There's much more, call it telling or verticality. It was a longer occupied site. And there are some real monumental structures like this ziggurat, which is very, very famous, of course. And unfortunately, because not only of climate change, but also military operations over the years, these buildings are really starting to deteriorate. And as Iraq opens up and tourism comes back into force, we want to make sure, especially the Iraq government wants to make sure that these sites and these features are protected. And just one last thing I want to mention. So in addition to the heritage preservation here, we're using the drone imaging also to survey in areas that had not necessarily been investigated intensely before. So those peri site areas. So you can sort of see the superficial traces and those white stains, and we're going to talk about those very soon. Next slide, please. So the big picture goal or big picture goals of the Lagash and the Or projects, the Penn Museum, the field, they really want to understand the form and function of these ancient cities. It's a really extraordinary, beautiful, at times terrifying environment. And so we have to, and this question has been asked, but we really haven't been able to answer it. Why did some of the earliest cities develop here? What did they look like? How sustainable were they? And ultimately, we want to document their evolutionary history. Next slide, please. So in 2017, so unlike Paul, I'm more geared towards the geological side of things here. But in order to execute a coring program, we need really good topographical information, just like we need for the survey, to understand where we wanted to place our course. So I used DRONEDEPLOY in concert with, at that time, a Mavic drone to create an elevation model. And it just so happened that during this process, next slide, please, And this site is Tel Zergel, as Gunther mentioned in the beginning. It's just to the south of Lagash, that we're getting really fantastic architectural sort of staining or patterning on the surface at a level of detail that is really remarkable, because these data are not necessarily captured, or often not captured in other types of remote sensing applications like magnetometry, because these are surface salts, and I'm going to talk about that in a second, that are really surface or just subsurface. And so the drone presents a really great opportunity to get at that information. Next slide, please. So just really quick, I know this is going to sound horrifically boring, but like, why are we getting such awesome data from these flights under certain conditions? So there's a lot of salt in this region of the world, and the saline water, through capillary action, gets brought to the surface, preferentially in mud, not in sand, because that sort of pressure and increased surface area is forcing that water to the surface. It gets there, it dries fairly rapidly because of the conditions, and then it leaves a sort of white efflorescence. And because a lot of structures in Mesopotamia, but especially in the Middle East today, were built with mud brick, which is very concentrated in clay, these salts are brought to the surface of the architecture in distinction to the soil matrix around it. Next slide, please. So, again, this is not sort of new. Dr. Elizabeth Stone of Stony Brook University really made headway with not just, she pioneered flying kites to get aerial image capture in Iraq, but more recently with satellite imagery, high resolution satellite imagery that was collected on optimal dates, optimal times of day, after optimal conditions. So perhaps there were recent rains. That's when we sort of get the best resolution. She was able to start really articulating entire neighborhoods. And you can see that based on some satellite imagery, she was able to get some good data from the site of Lagash, in fact. Next slide, please. So it's not just that we need to be higher than ground level to see these. In fact, we're on a spoil heap here, but you can see these patterns from the ground. The problem is because, and again, topography, elevation here is so tricky. If it's so flat, it's impossible to sort of make sense or contextualize any of this without getting high enough. So, you can even see this resolution as I pull out with the camera, changes a little bit. We're not really seeing the same patterns. So we really want that overhead and anchored spatially information. Next slide, please. And because we need that spatial information, because accuracy is so critical when we're thinking about things like walls, doorways, and because the elevation changes are so subtle, we decided to go with the Phantom 4 RTK, which integrates that RTK module right on top of the drone. It's a wonderful system that offers centimeter level accuracy horizontally, pretty close to that vertically. And incorporating the GNSS mobile station just really ensures that we're getting the best data possible that we can. Next slide, please. And so here's an instance, Paul ran this, where we were able to get a really solid topographic map over the course of about 2 weeks. The first week to run the flight plan you see here, and then the second week to fill in any issues that we had. And we did have a couple, but fortunately DRONEDEPLOY was on the email with us to get us where we needed to get. And so we really have this fantastic and fabulous contour plan, which immediately, without even having to be an archaeologist, tells you, well, this giant, enormous amoeba-looking site is not actually entirely settlement. And so it gives us a quick sense of, where do we need to target our walking surveys. Next slide, please. So in addition to the topographic map, and this is like more recently, we've been starting to do just the overhead imaging as I had done at Tel Zergel and others are doing in southern Iraq. And we're starting to, again, it depends on the day if it had rained recently, the time of the day, the patterns do change. So having sort of as many runs as possible is ideal. You know, we take all this back, we compare them to each other, we look at them against bathymetry data, and we then sort of adjust our research questions. So here is a very large wall that we found. We call this in area C. The elevation data just sort of helps you see how that's containing a sort of densely settled area. But it's a truly massive wall that, you know, we would have had no idea was there if we were just kind of walking across the surface. Next slide, please. And so here again, you can see with the surface scaling. I'm sorry, I don't have control of the arrow. And it's not your fault. I didn't tell you. I wanted to kind of point out this is huge. That's a modern shrine, that building that you see. But around that lighter soil that wraps around to the left is a part of that gate, and it looks like a sort of very large entrance. Next slide, please. So something else that we're using the drone imaging for with DRONEDEPLOY is off-site survey and drone mapping, really trying to expand our coverage and understand a broader sort of urban landscape. Next slide. And that's Dr. Zaid Al-Rawi with Paul. I just want to point out, he found this site that you see here on the top center. We do find a lot of these sites, and even the satellite imagery, these small sort of patches that we assume are ancient, but in fact, having flown it with the drone and looking at it with the elevation data on the top right there, you can see we saw this sort of radial pattern emanating. If you look down on the bottom, those are hexagon size photographs of modern marsh Arab settlements. They're sort of reed huts on mud islands that are seasonally inundated. You know, it matches up quite well. And, you know, these areas, of course, have been and continue to be inhabited for millennia. So we always have to be really careful about what we're interpreting. And the drone imaging is fantastic for sort of helping us get there. Next slide, please. So, in addition, we wanted to start to sort of expand technology repertoire, and we wanted to try thermal imaging. It's been done, you know, in places, even in archaeology in South the United States. It's been done very successfully by a professor named Jessica Sana. Conditions are not terribly different here, and so we tried it. For most of the season, we had a lot of difficulty with the gimbal assembly for the FLIR camera, mounting that onto our Phantom. Of course, there's all things in archaeology. We finally get it in the last week, and as you can see, you know, it's really promising data. It's similar concept. So these salts are delicate questions, if I'm saying that word right. So they attract moisture. You're exactly right. Very dry early in the morning. There's plenty of moisture in the air. And so these salts that float up to the surface absorb moisture, hold on water, and as the temperatures heat up throughout the day, those water-saturated soils have different temperature properties, thermal properties than the surrounding soil matrix. And so we also get some really great, I think we're going to get increasingly great information from that. Next slide, please. So the other part of this, especially at Or, which is now a World Heritage Site, very famously visited by the Pope recently. Lots of tourism is starting to come in, and the Iraqi government is looking at ways to shore up a lot of buildings that are falling into disrepair. Next slide, please. So Paul went ahead and created some models, as you can see here, including little wax printouts for educational purposes. I think I put an image there at the beginning of that. So, you know, Paul knows the technical details of all of this. He was the mastermind behind this. But in reality, because DRONEDEPLOY is so wonderful and sort of making this available to us out of the box, there isn't that much that went into it on our end, from my point of view. So here, the famous Iraq War dates to the sort of end of the third millennium BC. So it's been around for a while. It's hanging in there. It's been restored a little bit early on in the 20th century, but because these are built with mud baked bricks, they do deteriorate from salt and wind and people, frankly. So we're missing a couple of levels at the top, as you can see. We want to keep it from getting worse. And so the University of Pennsylvania is taking these models and they're giving it to a firm that they're working with. And you could click the next slide, please. And you can see, for instance, this is a building called the Emblematic. It's a sort of sacred gateway or entryway into that ziggurat compound. It's very well known for its very small, very obvious arch. So one of the earliest recorded uses of arch construction. But it is also falling apart again because of wind and rain, but it suffered some hits here during military conflicts. You can see that wooden frame inside the arch there is something the University of Pennsylvania and its collaborators have installed, and they're going to be continuing to shore up and even restore some of this building. I am shown the Royal Cemetery that also created a 3D model for this cemetery where Queen Muabi, with lots and lots of the jewels that are in the museum, was found by Leonard the site's original excavator. You can look at all the sketch account and get access to these models that way. Next slide, please. All right, so I just want to thank DRONEDEPLOY for giving us this opportunity to get our project out there, and the people that sponsored me. Thank you very much.
Wow, this is cool. Another awesome example of these stuff. And thanks for all the detail. I love seeing all of this stuff too. I analyze things, right? It's not boring to hear about those geological details, because that's how you actually go about doing analysis, right? And obviously, all the stuff that we do across industries and all that sort of thing, we're looking at these things on a high level, detail on that stuff. So it's cool to see it. Here. One thing else, going back to from the previous conversation, cool to see the expansions too of what you guys are working on, right? In the case of Chihuahua, we have verticals, right? You know, that people looking at the facade and that sort of thing. But if you're talking about very much like flat stuff, it's just very subtle, right? Tiny little difference that you're looking for and being able to tease out the information. Seeing that all this works and both context is cool. And it's just really exciting to think about these are things that have been around since when you say 2000 BC, right? So thanks very much for sharing that. And good luck with the future endeavors there. All right, we've got another 10 minutes or so for our question session. So I think back to looking at the chat. The question we have, you like, those out, everybody, and for those of the audience, please leave your questions in there, and we'll try to get as many as we can.
Great, yeah, thanks so much to all of our speakers. Our first question is for you, Reed. Really interested, you brought up climate change a couple of times during this, and really interested to hear what is the connection between that and the work you are doing.
So it's ironically and maybe very direct. So these surface surface they give us so much information about the sort of subsurface architecture is also eating away at the foundations of a lot of these archaeological structures. It's very caustic. And so they sort of have this melting effect over time. In fact, these cells are accumulations of mud breaks that they mound over time. So these salts that will really do a lot of damage. And then just the people problem now that we're especially open to tourists, it's fantastic. They bring a lot of schools there. People are able to celebrate their heritage by their times with how their ziggurat covered and students. And it's just not set up to have that at this time. And so there needs to be intervention, basically.
Wow, yeah. So the salts coming up this seems like a big issue there. I think for both of you, another question is how do you get approval and get these projects going in really sensitive environments and countries? What is the process been for you, Reed, in Iraq and and how did you form these partnerships, and what does that look like over the time scale of this research?
First and foremost, two very, so I can only speak for from my limited knowledge. There are other projects that are working there, and in Iraq, the state board of antiquities and heritage wants projects. It's good for local economy. It helps them to preserve heritage. Also, through 4 years, they've lost a lot of intellectual capital in their department. So I think people can come in there and talk about the latest technologies. The archaeology is extremely helpful. We have a wonderful project coordinator. I'm sorry for the barking. My small dog.
Excited about this project too. Yeah.
Exactly. So, he's fantastic. He's our RP dedicated to the United States and got his PhD, and he works closely with our project directors, doctors, Howard and Stephen Tinney of the museum at the University of Pennsylvania. Holly in particular, Holly has been working on Lagash during older excavations in the 1990 season. So she's very involved with the Iraqi community. So I think just having those conversations, reaching out, staying in touch, demonstrating care and concern has been what has gotten us the opportunities to go there and to do this research.
Yeah, that's great, and I think in both your project and Misiones Coloniales, we are seeing these really hyper local focuses. And so I know you're from the University of Pennsylvania, but it seems like a lot of this research involved academics in Iraq and the government there, and that's how you were able to accomplish that.
That's absolutely right. There are a lot of much more capable than I am, sort of drone operators, not only in the Iraq State Board of Antiquities and Heritage, but they're sort of para programs like GeoSurvey Iraq, which is their geological state program, and they help us with loaning equipment, with batteries, right? Because we have battery failures often enough, and they're really super competent, and they're there to support and facilitate the work.
Very cool. So, Fernando, we had a couple of questions for you on what is it like to get these really high, quality models of those structures? Do you have any tips for folks who are doing those really close-up projects with intricate building facades? How did you go about doing those flights? Had some questions about, maybe what is your kit like, what drones are you using, and then what is the actual flight plans that you're using for that too?
Okay. I want to share my screen. Show the technique that we use is to do the model.
Sure.
Why don't you send me the link? Is there a link that I can share to show that? That would be easier than back and forth. Oh no, there you go. All right, never mind. Perfect.
This model. We use autonomously fly the first layer. This one is 60 meters, and then go these cycles. It is not perfect. It is fly manually, at an angle of 60 degrees, and then we do another cycle of the perimeter of the building. And for the detail, there is interesting. We use a little circles of the site. Someone really low high, 3 meters. This is the first one.
Oh my God.
We can to power off the sensors of the drone because there are a lot of obstacles to avoid an accident, and we need to see the drone always we need to see the flag because it is the center of the city. Yeah, this is practice. This is only that we use to obtain this detail. Yeah.
Skilled piloting, very talented piloting there.
Thank you. Thank you.
And yeah, nicely done. Also, this is your permission from the local authorities and government, I assume, to do all this.
In Chihuahua, we don't have a regulation about this flag drones. This is a problem.
Yeah.
Understood. And that's certainly one of the things that we talk about is with regards to drone operations around the world, right? Regulations vary. It's important to always take safety into account and that sort of thing. But in something like here, it like takes just the skill of a very highly skilled pilot to get some of that detail, and so it's awesome to see. I also did note, by the way, also too, in looking at what was going on with in Iraq, you also had a number of different sort of levels that everybody was working with. So,
Yeah,
very cool to see how people do that.
yeah, I know Paul had to, particularly for the 3D models of the ziggurat and the Royal Cemetery that it didn't show, he had to have multiple runs basically to get the extra detail like Fernando is talking about, but that was some real beautiful flying.
Yeah. So switching from kind of the flight planning to the actual drones and kits, Reed, you're working in pretty remote places without a lot of internet, and it's a lot of planning. So we had a question of what does your kit look like? What are you bringing out there to the field, and how do you make sure that you're going to get the data you need?
So we have a 4G dongle in that RTK, the GNS, which keeps us in communication with the drone to make sure we're getting the differential data in real time. We also, Paul has sort of mobile internet. It's not as It's surprisingly cushy, actually, when you think about it, because we do get relatively good connectivity. There's a local base station too that we plugged into to make sure that the readings are as accurate as possible. And so in all those instances, we're fortunate. It's not something that would have been possible probably 5 years ago, 10 years ago.
Yeah.
But it was, definitely making those local connections to be able to sort of get access to these base stations, but also like knowing where to get the best wireless cards that they're not going to be outrageously expensive, and they're sufficient, and they're gonna last and do what they need to do. But yeah, it's actually not been too difficult. That said, we don't have the bandwidth to process these models, the amount of images that are required, and that's why having that sort of offline powerhouse of DRONEDEPLOY has been phenomenal.
Mm-hmm. And then you go back to wherever you were and upload the images and check out
every night, so they're up there and they're secure in the cloud, and those models are processing, and then we're back to doing more transects, more runs.
Awesome. And Fernando, I'm assuming you might have some similar issues with internet connectivity where you are.
Yeah, in some places we didn't have Wi-Fi or satellites, and we fly, and then we download the image and process in Office. Yeah, it's a problem in some.
Yeah.
And that's certainly when we see the challenge across many of the organizations that we work with, right? As in the previous webinars, we're talking with people who are doing like forest mapping and, in the Amazon and stuff like that. So for those who are out in the field and, actually experiencing the world and using this stuff, it's an ongoing challenge. And we'll see what happens with other emerging, connection technologies. As somebody mentioned, Starlink, that sort of thing. Maybe that'll make a difference for people. Well, awesome. Thank you all. I think we've just hit our time. It's been super cool to hear about this work from all of you guys. Thanks to the audience for your questions and participation today. This video will be we recorded this presentation, and so the video will be posted for people to take a look with later, again, or share with your friends. and all that sort of stuff. And again, thank you very much to our panelists today. Congratulations to Carla on heading off to her ceremony there. I read probably sometime in the future, you'll be heading off to a similar doctoral ceremony. And
Inshallah.
Then, yeah. So, all right. Anyway, thank you all very much. Thanks to everybody at the Drone Deploy team for hosting this. We all love doing this, and we will see you at the next one. Ciao.
Bye, everyone. Thank you again.